Hey, welcome back ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy, and let's talk about the ACOLYTE Episode 7, Give Us the Baby. Choice. We are going to talk about the good, the bad, and the theories, and later I'm going to hear from two Star Wars scholars, Dodd Seitz and Heather Antos. And later on, I'm going to tell you guys about the secret Darth Vader cameo that I think is coming next episode.
Say what?
But first, this show is hard to figure out.
Why, whatever do you mean?
Well, okay, there was so much to love in this episode.
Go on. Ask me.
I loved seeing how this woman uses the Force to prey on an immature Padawan's weaknesses, and seeing the visualization of a Jedi mind trick was awesome. It takes something we've seen for almost 50 years and introduces it in a new light. I also loved how the episode introduced weird new ideas, like this. And as soon as we get one question answered, the show poses deeper mysteries, like why in the hell did she just turn into mist? But I also think that this show is haunted by the same production problems that seem to affect all of these Disney Plus shows, which I'm going to talk about later. But first, let's get into some of the good stuff. The Force Coven is so much more interesting than, say, the Night Sisters were in the show Ahsoka. I loved how we got hints of their culture without everything being over-explained. I hope we actually never get to hear this culture explained. I like only seeing small slivers of their civilization and then getting to fill in the gaps with my own imagination. It makes them feel more real, and it also invites other creators to add to this story years down the line. Now, when I first tweeted about this episode, I was surprised to see that so many people rushed to say the show had bad writing, because I actually think the writing is one of the best parts of this story. The episode was very well balanced between each character's needs and desires. Apart from Torben, nobody really behaves selfishly. Everybody does what they think is best for others, but because of cultural differences, it ends in tragedy. The show is also expanding on the possibilities of the Force. I feel like we've been locked into this idea that the Force is just used to move around rocks and see the future.
Lifting rocks.
But in the animated shows, comics, and novels, we see the Force used to do so much more. To bring back the spirits of the dead, to speak to lost souls, to create life. And there were hints of this in the sequel trilogy. We saw Luke use Force projection. We saw Kylo Ren and Rey use the Force to pass physical objects to one another. And we're seeing the Force expanded in this show. So I hope that other live-action shows and movies take cues from this and expand on what is possible for a Force user. And the Kelnaka fight was so cool. I want to see more savage Wookiee Jedi fights. So this fight, along with the wire work from episode 1, also shows us what is possible for live-action Star Wars to achieve. And this is what I wanted from this show, to move the franchise forward with new ideas. Because you guys know how much I love Star Wars, and that's why we love designing Star Wars parody merch at our merch stores, like the brand new The Ability to Speak Doesn't Make You Intelligent, and May 25th, 1977, celebrating the release of A New Hope. We have Kill Sand and a Jaws parody shirt featuring Darth Teeth, and this is along with the many other Star Wars parody shirts such as Original Trilogy, Somehow Palpatine Returned, Good Soldiers Follow Orders, and many, many more. Guys, shopping our merch store is the best way to directly support our channel, and we love designing these shirts for you. Thanks for listening to the merch plug. The links are below. But my favorite part of this show is all the additions it's making to the canon. They introduced a Vergence in the Force, which ties into Anakin Skywalker, and it teases the beginning of Palpatine's master plan to cheat death to become immortal. Not to mention they're including material from the books, like the species the Tenons and Cortosis. But then I gotta say, why does so much of the show look so cheap? Sometimes we get these incredible location shoots that make conversations feel more real and more personal. But then we get episodes like this one where a lot of stuff just seems flat. I think this show has a comparable budget to House of the Dragon, and visually there's just no comparison. Compare Daemon and Harrenhal to where this Coven lives. These are both meant to be like creepy locales, but one feels damp and wet and real, and the other feels like a stage. Or the scene where the witches possess Kelnaka. It's shot wide with deep focus and flat lighting. It looks like a TV show. And I'm not just picking on the ACOLYTE. We see this in the Book of Boba Fett, Echo, Ahsoka, Loki. This is a problem with how Disney Plus budgets and plans their shows. Now, I've talked about this before, but I also think that 8 half-hour episodes is just not doing these concepts justice. Leslie Headland is a great writer. Russian Doll was awesome, and I know they have the skills to do more, and I want to see more! Torben is the first character in the show who wants something that is not related to the main story, and I empathized with him more than I ever did Yord or even Soul. This is a show about Jedi investigating a murder, and they were forced to solve the murder in the first episode. I wish they could have taken their time, you know, like Andor. A little later, I'm going to tell you guys my Darth Vader theory, but first, I'm so excited. Meeting here for the first time, we have Heather Antos, group editor of publishing at IDW, of licensing at IDW, and our very own Dodson Sites, whose work you can find here on the channel all the time. So guys, I'm really excited to talk to you about the good, the bad, and the theories. But Dodd, I want to start with you. Let's be nice. Let's go into the good things. I caught some flack on Twitter for saying I like the episode overall. Not saying it was perfect, not saying it doesn't have flaws, but I would like to hear from you. What did you like about episode 7 of The Acolyte?
There are plenty of fun things here. Once we got a ton of answers to a lot of the questions that we were looking for about what really happened that night. And I think a lot of our theories about, you know, episode 3 really just kind of showing things from one side, you know, panned out to be very true. And like the biggest thing that I've loved about Acolyte so far in general has just been the fact that like we're showing Jedis in a very fallible light. And I think this time, like this whole episode was the point of that, right? This whole episode we saw, you know, Soul, who's been kind of represented as this Obi-Wan-esque character, you know, the always good kind of guy, really start to make a mistake. I mean, at the whole episode, like he's falling victim to his emotions. He's just justifying it in a very Jedi way. He wants a Padawan and he's kind of trying to like, you know, make that fit what's going on here. Right. And so like, I think that like showing that and really starting to flesh out those characters and, you know, in that way, differentiating them was really entertaining to watch. And so like, that's really the heart and soul of what I loved about this episode. And as well as like the clarifications on a lot of the questions that we had. I think I've been waiting for us to figure out like the dirty secrets in Soul's closet. And so delivering on a lot of those was pretty satisfying for me.
Well, I think killing a mom right in front of her kid is right up there with some of the worst things pre-Anakin Darth Vader turn that we've ever seen a Jedi do. Yeah, you bring up some really good points. I do think they did a good job of elaborating on some of the things that we saw before, showing context, and especially we talked about this in our Easter egg video. Soul, we kind of don't know. Was it the Force that guided him this way? Was it his own selfish desire? And one thing I talked about earlier that I loved about this episode is how it did present all of these people, really, apart from Torben, with the noblest of intentions, and they all just screwed up and created a big mess. I'm not sure if presenting this sequence out of order was the right thing for telling the story, though. But before we get into our criticisms, which are legion, Heather Antos, what did you like about this episode?
We saw some really cool uses of the Force in this episode, right? Like from the witches and their possession, their group possession, to killing all the witches through their group possession. You know, we've never quite seen anything like that before. And as dark and terrible and horrible as it all was, it was really quite cool. I'm very curious as to what, I forget the character's name, Mama Witch, Anasea. I wanted to know like more what she was about to do with May, you know, before Soul kills her. I thought that was really interesting. And I was like bummed that he killed her just solely because I wanted to know what was about to happen.
Yeah,
now I don't know if we'll ever get that answer.
Ditto.
And I did like how the show, you know, Dodd, you made a nod toward this. The show did a good job it has done a good job of introducing mysteries. And you go, well, that's kind of interesting. You know, who's the Sith guy? And then when they answer that, they're good at posing more questions, which is kind of key to telling a good mystery.
Yeah.
And Heather, like I said, I'm with you. Like showing the internal, what goes on inside of the mind during possession was really cool.
That was really, really cool. And, you know, because that's one of the things that they've talked about a lot throughout this series from the very, very beginning. You know, I've known someone else who can do that. My mother could do that, like blah, 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 blah. You know, and we kind of saw it, you know, alluded to obviously in episode 3 when it happened with Torben externally, but to see it from the inside out this time was really cool. I also think, you know, that the lightsaber battles we saw, like with Kanaka and Torben and Soul and the other witch, you know, his defense and all that, I thought that was some of the better combat we've seen so far in this show, in part because it was just shot better. I know that's a thing that we have been back and forth on throughout this series, which I think is really interesting. The fact that there are some scenes where the combat is shot so excellently and others where it is shot so poorly. And I'm curious as to whether that's second unit, first unit teams. I don't know.
I'd be curious to see the breakdown of first and second unit, period. There was something I talked about earlier where I mentioned like the possession scene could have looked really great and creepy and weird and dark, but
It's
it looked like a TV show. Yeah, it was very tight. It was like a wide shot. It was flat lighting, low contrast for some reason. You would think you're filming like a Force Witch Coven. Like there's a shot in the Agatha trailer of I don't know we don't know who they are yet, but there's like an evil kind of devil nun or something that looks great. And I was thinking that's how they could have shot this. It could have looked like that. It could have looked like really cool. But instead, these ideas are introduced that are very interesting and then kind of sit flat. Or when I say sit flat, I mean literally flat on the screen because for some reason, I don't know where their budget's going for this stuff. Like you compare it to House of the Dragon, which I'm not a bookkeeper. I don't work at Disney or HBO. I don't know exactly what the budgets are, but rumors are the budgets are comparable. I don't know why House of the Dragon looks so great, and I don't know why this show looks like it does. Todd, you reminded me of something earlier, and Heather, I want to ask you about this. So the problem with a mystery show, like or any show where sequences are presented out of order, like Book of Boba Fett, you have to justify presenting it out of order. Whatever your reveal is, it has to be such a good reveal that it didn't matter that you were sacrificing character development. And what I mean by that is like Soul. Dodd, you mentioned we have Soul and his motivations, and it's all questionable. It would have been great to have known about his desire to have a Padawan before he tracks down his former Padawan. I think they lost emotional resonance from that. So the reveal, I don't know that it outweighed what we've lost in character development this entire time. I kind of think that just knowing what would have happened prior to episode 1 would have gone a long way for us. Heather, what do you think about the structure of this show?
I struggle because I just don't know why it matters. When you have a mystery box, the reveal of the mystery has to affect the stakes in some way or shape or form, right? You go back to Lost. Where are they? Why are they on this island? Are they going to get off this island? Whether or not they stuck the landing, that landing mattered and affected the entirety of the story, right? With this episode and kind of ACOLYTE as a whole, I'm constantly asking myself, but why does this story matter? What is this reveal supposed to be telling us? What is it? How is it supposed to be affecting the characters? Ostensibly, we can assume that this episode is Soul telling May the truth, right? Because that's how the previous episode ended. He's like, I have something I'm going to tell you. You're going to listen. Cut to this episode. And in my head, I'm like, I think she can assume that the Jedi killed everyone. She was there when he killed her mother. She knows she started the fire. She was already killing all of the Jedi. So why does this reveal matter? How does this affect the story in any way, shape, or form? If this reveal was going to matter to anyone, you think it would matter to be revealed to the Jedi Council, to Vernestra, or to Osha. Like, I wanted Osha to be discovering all of this information. I thought that would have been a much cooler reveal.
Well, it did shed some light on why the Jedi were there, because you think like it seems like the Jedi showed up to like stop this coven and assassinate them and snatch these kids when they weren't there for that at all. So I think that, at least to the show's credit, they did explain well. Dodd, what about you? What is it about this episode that grinds your gears?
The main thing that I think everyone's been complaining about is the pacing, right? And I like I liked episode 3. I liked what it was giving us. I liked all the lore that it gave us as well, and like how it was connecting both the prequel trilogies and the sequel trilogies and kind of making it all one. It felt very Star Wars. But my big thing was that like I enjoyed that, but I enjoyed it in the context of seeing 4 episodes back to back because I binge things. And otherwise, this pacing for a week, like people are going to sit on this for kind of like a week kind of thing. And I don't know if that's really the way that the best way to tell that part of the story, right? It's such an integral part of it. And so while I did love all the answers that we got from 7, and I did like all the different layers that we added to it and showing that episode 3 was just from one point of view and this is the other point of view, there was a lot of retreading that I almost felt like we didn't even need to do. And we could have gotten, like when I saw the runtime at first, I was almost excited. I was like, hey, this is cool. We've been complaining about short runtimes for a minute, right? We finally get an episode where it's going to have a decent amount of runtime. And then we really don't move the story further. I mean, like we get some extra details on what's going back here, but like seeing at least some progress going on with what's going on with Soul and Osha and things like that, right? Spending the entire episode 7, backtracking a lot of stuff. To me, pacing wise, I was like, they have a lot of ground to cover and a lot of things to wrap up in that finale. Right. And whether or not they leave some of it ambiguous or not, I think is going to be up to what they choose to do. But like, as you were saying before, every time they reveal something, it opens up more questions. Well, like we've got everything, like all the secret stuff behind Chimera and like what his motivations are to still understand and explore. We need to understand how May came back, right? Like how she came back from that fall or anything else like that. We need to understand Venestra is up to something. And there seems to be something there. So like that's just a lot for them to get within this next episode here. And so like I am a bit concerned with how that ends up.
You know, the next episode's the finale. I don't know what it is, you know, like I don't what are we building to? Like I feel like we have to be building to a lightsaber fight with Chimera and Venestra. How do we get there? I have no idea. I don't know why those two would meet aside from so the story can happen, right? Like there's a lot of things, as you said, there's a lot of ducks to get in a row and line up and resolve that. I don't know how logically we'll be able to get there, especially if it's a runtime again of like 33 minutes.
I hope it's not. I'm really hoping, even though a 33-minute video is extremely easy for us to make, I hope it is balls to the wall, hour and a half, and we're struggling right up to the last minute to post our Easter egg video. Dodd, to your point about the structure of this, right? Leslie Headland said they're going for Rashomon, which we talked about in our Easter egg video, the Kurosawa movie presenting things from different points of view. Fine. But with Rashomon, you're seeing the same events, but they play out so differently from different points of view. It's like watching the story in a new way. We, like you said, Heather, we repeated a lot of beats instead of doing that this time. So I think a lot of it's too much Rashomon. And I hate to keep bringing up Andor, because at this point, saying Andor is the best Star Wars show is like saying your favorite band is the Beatles. It's like, no duh. But those first 3 episodes of Andor, they did a great job of establishing, of cutting between the flashbacks and the present day, where the flashbacks would build up to a fever pitch and then they would lead into the next thing that happened. It's kind of like screenwriting 101, but I don't think the structure of this show benefits the characters and the story in the way, like, I'll hold out to the finale. But again, I think that knowing all this information about Soul in the first episode would have, he would have mattered. And I don't think a lot of these people, to paraphrase you, Heather, like Yord doesn't matter. The only person who matters for me right now at this point is Torben, because Torben's the only person who had a relatable motivation that had nothing to do with the plot of the story.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, and again, this episode did confirm questions and hypotheses we've had about Soul, right? This whole time, like we've seen his emotion get to the better of him this whole time. We've seen him teetering, on the dark side and the emotions and all of that this whole time. So while the reveal I think was interesting, I don't think, it was all that surprising to be revealed now. Had the viewer known this secret the whole time, it's one of those, like, have the viewer know something the characters don't know and have that hanging over us the whole time we're watching that, right? We're not in on the mystery at all, that these characters are unraveling, and we're kind of just as lost as all of them in all of this. And I think that's where the show is really struggling.
I sound like a broken record when I say this, but what I really want from this show is just longer runtime, Dodd. Like I want
agreed.
Just more from these characters. It's a Jedi murder mystery show. Give us a couple episodes where they go to different planets and we find out that, Yord is a little more conflicted. We get a hint that he had this thing with May when they were Padawans, but what was it? It doesn't matter. He's dead. It's just moving at this lightning pace, which again, I am not even going to blame the writers or even the production crew on any of this. I think it's this Disney Plus model. I don't know where the money goes. I think they're like the Pentagon. I think that this money disappears into a black ops program that funds a new Disney park that they're secretly building in the Midwest. I don't know what's going on. Ooh, Cincinnati would be cool. I hope they do that. But I'm kind of at a loss for why they structure shows. And it's not just Lucasfilm. This is Marvel as well.
I compare a lot of serialized mystery box shows to Supernatural season 1. I think Supernatural season 1 is a perfect example of how to do this well. You know, that entire season, I'd have to look up exactly how many episodes it is, but you know, they're all one and done monster of the week type episodes, much like the first season of Mandalorian, honestly, which is highly regarded as a very well made season, one of Disney Plus's best in the Star Wars realm. And you know, it answers the big arc question of the season. And then every episode you spend time with the characters, get to know the characters, but it answers another question of that mystery. And then at the end of that season, you get the answer to that mystery. And yeah, it's the time we get to spend with these characters that makes us care about them and be invested in their stories. And because of how disjointed the storytelling has been, we've not really been allowed to spend any substantial amount of time with any character.
Daphne Keene's character, probably the most, and everything about them we're told Osha had attachment, you know, we're told that May has a grudge against the Jedi, but we're not even shown why until episode 7.
We're told that Osha failed, right? We're told that. We don't even know that. We haven't seen any of her time with the Jedi. If we're getting any backstory, you know, I would have loved to see some of that time to understand her situation with them and to help explain some of the context of what happened in episode 6, you know.
I'd even argue that like the time that we have spent on stuff, we've focused a lot on the wrong characters, right? Like, or just spent too much time. We've spent a lot of time focusing on May and Osha as a child, but like the real part and the gut of their story is what's happening to them now. Right, how they're reacting to it today, kind of thing. And like those things could have been chopped and been, you know, little splice moments within there, and really give the bulk of the narrative to them and their development. And I think that would have made a much broader story. Same thing with Yord. Like we spent a lot of time trying to get to know him just for him to get killed off. Same thing with Jackie, or 3 Hole Punch Girl. We fleshed out her character. You know, I got a better understanding of her character right before she's killed off. But the characters I want to know more about are Chimere, right? And like, a lot of the stuff that we're getting about Soul, like again, as you're saying, Heather, they've already been teased very much down there. We're finally just getting confirmation of those things. But I would have loved to see more depth there as well, and like a lot of stuff on Mother Anastasia and things like that. Like we want to know about Venestra, right? We haven't gotten much spotlight on there, so I feel like there's almost a misprioritization of the amount of time that's spent on it as well.
Hey, but we know Vernestra's partner really doesn't want to go on this mission.
Right.
We do know that. We spent a lot of time on that.
Right. Right. I do have a Vernestra theory. I think it's going to justify what she's doing in the show that relates to canon that I'll talk about later on. Now, I love talking to you guys because you both have such a keen understanding of story. You know, Heather, you've worked in creating some of my favorite stories for years. Dodd, you've written for ScreenCrush and all these other things. But the reason we're here is because we are Star Wars people. And you guys, I know you're meeting for the first time, but we all have like our different specialties in Star Wars, which makes this a lot of fun to kind of bring you together and form this hive mind. One thing I truly love about this show is its contributions and what it takes from the canon, and most importantly, gives back to the canon. The reason I like this episode so much is because I thought it introduced cool ideas into Star Wars. I think it's a show not told very well, but what it's bringing into it is so much fun. And I think it's very bitterly ironic that so many toxic Star Wars fans have criticized that aspect of the show, which I think is where it's strongest. But we haven't seen a Star Wars like this in a long time that is so much fun to craft theories around. I think the last theory that was this much fun was who saved Grogu. And in the end, none of our theories are right. And what they did was even better. So before I talk about my theories, what do you guys have for me theory-wise about what's going on in the finale? There's still a lot that's not answered.
I know. Gosh, I mean, I don't know. I still think there's something to the Soul Chimere, sun moon thing of it all. We see.
Really?
I don't know. I don't think they're gonna do anything of it, but it's my like head. It's in my fantasy. Like we see Soul. Soul is the one who turns to the dark side because he's so close as it is. And it's clear that he and Chimere have a lot of history, though again, we don't get any of that in any of the flashbacks. But
you think so? He did say he didn't recognize me, but I thought that was because he saw him in the shop.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't
like
know.
the sun moon thing though. I had Dodd, you had mentioned thinking they have a connection, but I haven't really thought of it.
I do.
I feel like there's something. I don't know. They wouldn't have named him that unless it was
True.
intended.
I like that, Heather. That's fun. And we haven't talked about that in any of our videos, even
It
though
means
Dodd
moon
has told me
in
that a
Arabic.
couple times. It means moon in Arabic. Well, you know what? Every day's a school day. Dodd, what about you? You got anything that you think is going to be really fun we're going to talk about?
I'll start with Darth Zaddy because he's definitely my favorite. My favorite character that we've introduced here.
Far.
Yeah, he's so interesting, and like I really just want to know what's going on between him and Soul. And so maybe this theory is just fan canon for what I think could be it. But I think like we've talked a little bit. I can't remember the person's name who you were talking about earlier in the season who had the idea about the force projections, right? We see that with Luke in The Last Jedi, how he's able to project himself, vast distances. We thought that could be something of the case with Osha and May, and that seems a little less likely now with some of the stuff we've seen, but also some of the stuff in episode 7 kind of makes it feel like that could be the case too. Anyways, but what if instead of it being Osha and May that are force projections of each other, is it possible that Soul and Chimere are somehow force projections of each other? Like, what if Chimere was trying to, with Soul, in an attempt to get himself more in balance with the Force, tried to push his dark side away from him so much so that it became its own entity, right? That way it would explain why Chimere recognizes Soul, because he is Soul. Chimere seems like a little bit of a mirror of Soul in a lot of ways. Like Soul is good for the wrong reasons in a lot of times, and Chimere is wrong for the good reasons a lot of the time. And so there's that parity between them that I think there could be something. So maybe he's some kind of my hope is he's some kind of like force projection or even just like the a purified version of some of the emotions that Soul was having, especially when you look at the fact that, like, what does Chimere want right now? He wants a pupil. He admits that right off the bat. Right. He's not ashamed of that to do it. It's almost like if Soul had embraced those emotions that he was having, instead of trying to be like, no, I'm a Jedi, I'm just doing this because I care about these kids and all that kind of stuff, and trying to like justify it. If he just embraced it and said, no, I want a pupil, right? Then like he would be Chimere. My first theory would be that Chimere shadow soul idea. Fingers crossed that we get some more information on that in the finale.
I love the origin you came up with. That it reminds me of Adam Warlock in the early 90s when he got the Infinity Gauntlet and he expelled all the good and evil from himself and created two villains inadvertently in the process. That'd be kind of cool. Again, I definitely think with those names being that, which I can't believe I'm hearing the Chimere Moon thing for the first time. I think there's definitely at least meant to be some kind of symbolic connection between them. But yeah, you can't deny though the theory crafting, especially when you get into Plagueis and the Force Dyad. And Heather, do you think that's all fitting the canon well?
I think so. I think there's so much, especially with this particular time period, that we just don't know. It's such a truly unexplored era of Star Wars, which allows the creators to do all of this additive stuff in a really, really cool way. I did have an early theory that perhaps Chimere was Plagueis, like that was going to be our tie-in in some way. He might be, he still could be, who knows? I do think regardless of whatever gets revealed and wrapped up, in this next episode, I do think we're going to have some sort of prequel tie-in in some way, shape, or form.
I definitely think so. And that's the theory that I want to talk to you guys about right now. First, I got to thank you, Heather Antos and Dodson Sites. You can find their social links below, and they are great follows on all platforms. Please, please, please add them. We refuse to pay anybody. They only get paid in LPPs. So now I want to tell you guys what my big theory is about the finale of this show. So like I said earlier, my favorite thing about this show is its connections to established canon. And like Heather and Dodd were saying, this is likely showing us Darth Plagueis' original plans for creating life and setting up Palpatine's return almost 200 years later. But I think the finale is going to explain one of the most confusing lines in the prequels.
You refer to the prophecy of the one who will bring balance to the Force.
I've always thought this, that if the Jedi thought the Sith were extinct, why did they believe in an ancient prophecy that Anakin was the chosen one?
With all due respect, Master, is he not the chosen one?
And the prequels were vague on what bringing balance actually meant. And I think this show is proposing what that balance means, because it's all about duality, and the Force cult seems to worship the yin-yang symbol showing balance in the Force. But here's the theory. In this show, we also have this weird subplot involving Vernestra Rwoh, where they specifically mention that she does not like hyperspace.
You get nauseous when you travel through hyperspace?
I don't get sick. I find it unsettling.
So why did they choose Vernestra Rwoh for this show instead of, I don't know, any other Jedi from the High Republic? I think it's because in the New Republic books, hyperspace allows Vernestra to have visions in the Force. She foresaw the creation of her light whip in a vision. I think that while she is in hyperspace, she is going to have this vision of one who's bringing balance. And in this vision, she is going to see Anakin and Darth Vader, just like how Vader appeared in Anakin's vision on Mortis in the Clone Wars. And I also think this prophecy is going to be very vague and that Vernestra is going to misunderstand its meaning, which Yoda basically implied here.
Is he not to destroy the Sith and bring balance to the Force?
A prophecy that misread could have been.
But the audience, with the benefit of hindsight, is going to understand her full vision. And maybe this vision will even include Rey as the chosen one. Not because she ultimately kills Palpatine, but because Rey's creation is part of this whole process that might have created May and Osha. Palpatine sought to create his own versions in the Force so he could exploit it to create eternal life for himself. And Rey is the daughter of an offshoot of one of those experiments. I just love how this show is tying together elements from the books, the prequels, the OT, and the sequel trilogy. I think Disney Star Wars at its best can take all of the elements that maybe didn't work in the movies and improve upon them for the next generation, much like the Clone Wars did for the prequels. So guys, let me know what you thought of this episode down in the comments or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, welcome to the channel. Please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.